In 1865, deep within the rigid, unyielding walls of a convent outside Rouen, France, lived a woman who defied every known law of human physiology. Her name was Sister Elara, and she possessed a terrifying, impossible gift. She could, at will, command her own heart to stop beating. This was no parlor trick, nor the fleeting stoppage caused by shock. Witnesses, including skeptical priests and highly trained secular doctors, clocked periods of absolute, measured cardiac silence that stretched, unbelievably, beyond 20 minutes. Elara claimed this ability was not hers but a divine instruction, given for a purpose she refused to articulate. The scientific community, dedicated to calcified dogma, dismissed the initial reports as hysteria or deception. Yet the physical evidence was undeniable. Her skin would turn pallid, her breathing would cease, and the most sensitive stethoscopes registered a spectral silence in her chest. The real terror, however, came during her final documented test. After months of grueling observation, her pulse vanished permanently. But the chilling epilogue, documented years later, showed her body resisting decomposition for 50 years. What secret power did Sister Elara command? What did the doctors discover that shattered their understanding of life and death? And why did her heart's final silence trigger the impossible decay? The medical world was shaken to its foundation. Before we delve into the terrifying observations recorded during that final fatal test, subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and comment below with your state or country. Now, let us return to the rigid skepticism of 1865. The year is 1865, a time when empirical science was aggressively challenging spiritual belief, and the medical world dismissed anything that deviated from the observable. Sister Elara entered the public consciousness when her convent reported her miracle to the local bishop, hoping for canonization. Instead, the bishop, wary of charlatanism, dispatched Dr. Jules Valois, a clinical physiologist known for his ruthless skepticism. Valois arrived armed with the latest equipment, sensitive spring scales for measuring minute weight changes, and the newly perfected binaural stethoscope. His initial goal was to expose a fraud, but what he found was physiological defiance. Elara was not merely holding her breath, she was actively controlling the involuntary muscle of the heart. During the early tests, documented with obsessive precision, Valois recorded periods where the heart rate dropped from 70 beats per minute to 30, then 10, then 0. For 5 harrowing minutes, the woman was clinically dead. Upon revival, which she executed herself with a sudden, sharp intake of breath, she was completely lucid, yet deeply unnerved. Valois demanded an explanation beyond divine instruction. She revealed that the power required not just faith, but a specific, terrifying concentration, a mental withdrawal from the physical body, leaving it vacant. The conflict was immediately established, science insisting on muscle control, and Elara insisting on spiritual command. This terrifying initial success only spurred the medical team to demand the ultimate proof. A full observation of a profound, sustained cardiac arrest, which would push the boundaries of human endurance and her own chilling self-control. The initial 5-minute cessations were classified by Dr. Valois as a sophisticated form of catatonia, or yoga, dismissing the mystical element. However, Sister Elara's claims became darker, intertwining her physiological anomaly with a profound sense of duty. She did not describe her ability as a blessing, but as a heavy demand placed upon her soul. She explained that she was instructed to demonstrate this cessation not for fame, but as a sign of the coming stillness, a prophetic warning of a great tragedy that would sweep across Europe. This elevated the stakes from a mere medical curiosity to a high-stakes, chilling prophecy. The church officials grew increasingly uncomfortable, recognizing that her power strayed into territory that was less miraculous and more unnervingly occult. The medical team pressed her. What was the maximum duration she could sustain the silence? Elara hesitated, her eyes fixed on something far beyond the convent walls. She finally admitted that the cessation brought her mind to a place of absolute cold and stillness, and that remaining there too long was dangerous. It risked the soul forgetting the way back to the body. This fear only intensified the doctors' clinical obsession. They reasoned that if she could survive 10 minutes without brain damage, they could prove the body had reserves previously unknown to man. Valois, driven by scientific ambition, prepared for the ultimate test, a sustained, prolonged cardiac silence lasting 20 minutes. He theorized that if she could endure this, the findings would redefine modern anatomy. He failed to consider that he might also be redefining the human soul itself. The day of the major test was fraught with tension. A small team, including Dr. Valois, a skeptical priest, and a notary to document every second, gathered in Elara's sterile chamber. The goal: 20 minutes of silence. Elara, pale and focused, began her preparatory prayer, which seemed less like worship and more like a dismantling. At the designated signal, she closed her eyes. Within 30 seconds, the pulse was gone. Valois checked the carotid artery. Nothing. He pressed the stethoscope to her chest. Only a faint, hollow internal noise, like water settling in a deep cave. The seconds stretched into agonizing minutes. At the 10-minute mark, the priest began to murmur prayers for the dead. At the 15-minute mark, the notary's hand was shaking so badly he could barely record the time. But the true terror occurred 5 minutes past the agreed-upon limit. At 25 minutes, Valois, his scientific detachment finally shattered, leaned in and screamed her name. He was terrified she had genuinely perished under his observation. Just as Valois prepared to declare the time of death, Elara executed her revival. It was not a gentle return, she gasped, violently seizing the air, and her heart slammed back into rhythm with such force it reportedly rattled the stethoscope. But she did not open her eyes immediately. Instead, she began to whisper, not in prayer, but in what sounded like an ancient non-European tongue. When her eyes finally snapped open, they were glazed, and she looked directly at Valois, not seeing him, but seeing through him. She delivered a chilling, specific warning about the location and time of a massive, future historical tragedy, a prophecy that would, decades later, prove devastatingly accurate. Valois recorded the physiological impossibility of the 25-minute survival, but he buried the prophecy. He realized the power wasn't a controllable muscle trick. It was a psychic conduit, and he had just forced the line open for too long. He knew with dreadful certainty that their scientific curiosity had awakened something truly dangerous. Despite the terror of the 25-minute prophecy, the church demanded one last verification. Sister Elara was growing weaker, her eyes perpetually shadowed, and her periods of normal wakefulness were filled with a profound, debilitating exhaustion. She knew this final test was a demand for her life, but accepted it with chilling resignation. This time, she was brought to a larger, clinical facility where she was subjected to constant monitoring, including a rudimentary heart rate gauge that printed continuous paper tape. The date was October 19, 1865. Elara entered the cessation state easily, perhaps too easily. The heart rate monitor flattened instantly. Minutes passed. The medical team, now subdued and terrified, waited for the familiar, violent return. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. The room was silent, save for the faint scratch of the paper tape. 30 minutes. Dr. Valois ordered a stronger stimulant administered, but the body refused to react. At 32 minutes, the attending physician declared her officially and permanently deceased, noting that the physiological process appeared identical to her previous temporary cessations. Yet the return failed. What followed was the official autopsy, a formality that yielded the first impossible discovery. The organ function, though stopped, showed no signs of cellular distress typically associated with extended lack of oxygen. The heart muscle was intact. The brain tissue was pristine. It was as if she hadn't died due to physiological failure, but had simply decided not to reactivate. Valois, writing his final confidential report, noted a subtle, almost imperceptible detail. The tissues were abnormally dense, unnaturally cold to the touch, and resisted the scalpel with strange fiber-like resilience. It was the first, dark hint of the decades-long mystery that would follow. Sister Elara was interred in the convent's mausoleum, her death officially ruled as cardiac failure during a self-induced catatonic state. Dr. Valois, haunted by the prophecy and the clinical impossibility, sealed his final report and resigned from the profession. But the story did not end with the turning of the grave soil. 50 years later, in 1915, the convent prepared to relocate the mausoleum's contents due to construction. What the workers discovered was the absolute, final, terrifying proof of Sister Elara's impossible power. When they opened her coffin, the body was found in a state of near-perfect preservation, not mummified, nor saponified, but uncannily intact. The body had resisted decomposition for 50 years, remaining lifelike in color and structure, defying microbial decay entirely. Subsequent clandestine inspections confirmed that the tissue still possessed that abnormal density Valois had noted. The answer, though terrifying, lay in her own account. The cessation was a true spiritual withdrawal, leaving the body in a state of suspended animation, biologically inert but physically perfect. Her final silence was not death. It was an eternal, frozen concentration. The medical consensus was forced to whisper the impossible truth. Sister Elara's act of self-stopping had somehow recalibrated her cellular clock, making her body immune to the march of time after her soul had departed. Her final, greatest miracle was not halting her heart, but commanding her flesh to wait for 50 years, a silent testament to a power that blurred the line between prayer and physics. What do you think of this story? Do you believe this physiological defiance was a true spiritual miracle, or an anomaly of biological control unlike any seen before? Leave your comment below. If you enjoyed this dark historical mystery and want more stories that blur the line between science and the supernatural, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. These stories need to be remembered. See you in the next video.